Hello and welcome to Africa Here and Now, the conversation you've always wanted to have about the continent. I'm Martine Dennis. Today, there's a new leader of the African Union. Djiboutian MAHMOUD Ali Youssouf takes the reins at perhaps the most significant moment for Africa since the end of the Cold War, as the global order is being systematically upended. To explore the challenges facing the new chairman and the institution itself, we're joined by Dr. Arikana Chihombori, former AU ambassador to the US, and Donu Cogborough, the writer and broadcaster. She joined us a little bit later in the conversation. Ambassador Arikana Chihombori, it's a real pleasure to get to talk to you on this occasion that we have a new head of the African Union. He's the Djiboutian MAHMOUD Ali Youssouf, and he's taking the reins at a very interesting time, shall we say. How would you assess the challenges ahead for the African Union in 2025?
Well, let me just say this moment, and by the way, thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing, shedding light on very important issues to do with our beloved continent. Yes, this is a very interesting time. It is a very crucial time. It is a very important time that we are appointing a new chair of the African Union. I am excited that we are finally saying good riddance to bad rubbish by getting rid of the former African Union chair who has done absolutely nothing for the African Union for the past 8 years. My apologies for not mincing my words, but it is the truth. All of Africa is celebrating, definitely the citizens of Africa. We are celebrating the exit of Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat. We are welcoming the entrance of a new era, the era that we hope that we are going to have what this moment is calling for. We are calling for a Pan-African leader. This moment is calling for Pan-African leadership in every country, and of course, at this moment, at the African Union. And we must have the right person leading the African Union. A person with their head on the right shoulders, a person who understands the struggles that we have been through as Black people in Africa, a person who understands what our Pan-African fathers were trying to accomplish when they met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963. We are looking for that individual who is going to finish the unfinished business that was started in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, when they created OAU, now AU.
And is that person MAHMOUD Ali Youssouf, in your opinion?
I really do not know him, to be very honest with you. So I couldn't really comment on what his positions are when it comes to the issues of Africa pertaining to Pan-Africanism. I would hope that he is from Djibouti. He understands the struggles that we are facing as Africans on the continent. But I do believe that he is a child of the soil, and that having been a foreign minister, he understands the challenges and he has seen firsthand what we are having to deal with as Africans on the continent.
This is a particular moment, isn't it? It's a moment when the global order as we know it, that has been in place at least since the Second World War, is being systematically torn apart. What specifically then does Mr. Youssouf and his new team have to get to grips with first?
They first of all must get to grips with the wide tentacles of the invisible hands who are creating havoc, have created havoc in Africa for centuries. He has to understand the systems that are in place to keep Africa where they want Africa to be. He has to understand the role that Africa, the pivotal role that the African Union can play in melting, in dissolving some of these tentacles or cutting them or whatever he has to do. But first understand the invisible hands and the role they are playing, because for far too long, we have been made to concentrate on the leaves and the trees and the bad, bitter fruits of this tree and being kept away from dealing with the issues of the root. The African tree of life must be understood from the roots all the way to the leaves and the flowers and the fruits. So I would hope that the African Union chair would really take inventory of the root causes of why Africa is where Africa is today. Otherwise, he's going to find himself chasing his tail until his term is over.
All right, you're talking metaphorically at the moment. What specifically are you referring to when you talk about the invisible hands that are keeping Africa where it is today?
Let me take, for example, the issue at hand in the DRC. We need to understand who are the players in the DRC who are keeping the conflicts going. DRC has been a hot potato for far too long. We all know, for example, the multinationals who love that uranium, who love the diamonds, who love the gold and all the other essential minerals that the Congo is endowed with. They are the ones who have tarmacs in the jungles of the Congo. They are the ones who are flying 747s into the Congo and picking up minerals and flying right out without a penny going to the government. They are the ones who are using their satellites to identify areas that are rich in these minerals. The poor villagers who live and have lived in those areas for centuries are now, they send a few people with guns, shoot a couple of people, so the villagers can run away because they found out there's a mile stretch of diamonds that they want. So when the villagers run away, they stay behind and build their tarmacs and mine the diamonds or whatever the mineral is that they are after. We must understand those multinationals, those companies that are playing those games. They're the ones supporting the conflicts.
Right. And what should the role of the AU be in this? I mean, Mr. Youssouf, in his campaigning for the top job at the AU, he did prioritize peace and security and dealing with conflict on the continent. What should the role of the AU be in, for instance, the conflict in Eastern DRC?
Let me tell you, for starters, they could start by supporting what is going on in the Sahel. When you look at how President Traore has been able to win the war against terrorism, the way he did it, he got rid of France. He got rid of the French troops. The French troops, we all know very well, were caught with action, and yet the trucks were supposed to be delivering aid. So he needs to really deal with this to let them know that you have played your games for far too long. I have been in many meetings during my tenure as the African Union Ambassador to the United States. I sat in meetings where people in leadership did not say what they were supposed to say. I sat in a meeting when they were discussing the issue of instability in the DRC prior to the elections. Everybody was dancing around the issue. I reminded them, I said, we're talking about the monkeys and squirrels in the room. The 10,000-pound gorilla are the multinationals who are funding the terrorism. And yet everybody's talking about what are we going to do? There's going to be a lot of, this election is going to be very expensive. Where is the money going to come from? It was rubbish. So finally, I did ask the question. I said, you know the truth. You know the people, the perpetrators of these conflicts. You know where the guns are coming from. You know who's funding the guns. Yes, you have strategies for dealing with various issues in the Congo. The real question is, what strategy do you have to deal with the multinationals who are funding the conflicts, to deal with the multinationals who are actually instigating the conflicts? And suddenly they started shuffling papers. Ambassador, Ambassador. That was the end of the meeting. My question was never answered. We need leaders who are bold. We need leaders who are going to look at these multinationals, to look at these superpower Western countries, look them in the face and say, this is what you're doing. It's wrong. You wouldn't want it in your country. We don't want it in Africa as well.
You were pretty dismissive of Faki, the outgoing chair of the African Union. You said he hadn't done anything for 8 years or whatever. How far is the personality, the drive, the individual skills of the person in the top job, how far does that determine the nature of the work that gets done? Or is it an institution that needs completely overhauling?
The issue with Musa Faki, everybody was aware, heads of state, He was severely compromised. Some go as far as saying he was an agent of the French. To be honest with you, many African governments, some of their own members of the government are on payrolls of foreign countries. And I'm telling you the honest truth that I know for a fact. And so the governments themselves are struggling with internal issues pertaining to their own people being sellouts. And so it depends on the character of the person. Are you willing to do what is right for the benefit of 1.4 billion people? Or are you going to be selfish and look at your own advancement? For example, we don't want an African Union chair who's going to use the African Union position as a stepping stone to becoming the head of state for his country.
And Donu Kogbra is with us. Donu is in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Hey, Donu.
Hello.
What's your question?
I wanted to ask Ambassador Arikana for how long we can blame outsiders for our problems. I quite agree that there are a lot of examples of sabotage from external forces. But I've lived in Nigeria now for 25 years, though I shuttle to the UK, so you could say I also live in the UK. And I frequently compare the two countries. And I think, honestly, never before have I seen so much corrupt, self-interested behavior as I see in African leaders. And this is the most important African country in terms of size, at least, yeah? And I just wonder, how we can't keep on blaming other people for errors that are caused by our own greed, corruption, and stupidity.
It's a very good question. And it's a question that I would be challenged with every time that I addressed African diaspora across the Western Hemisphere, African diaspora within the continent. And I explain it to them very simply put. Let's look at a scale of 1 to 10 of Africa's pivotal top 10 issues. When you look at the issue of leadership in Africa, I rank it around 7, 8, 9, 10. Why? Some of these leaders are specifically put in place to do the dirty work of their Western supporters. Let's look, for example, the issue of the Sahel nations. And I'm sure you're fully aware of how well President Traore is doing in Burkina Faso. He addressed issue number 1, issue number 2, and issue number 3. That was the issue of French dominance. I don't care if you take the 14 former French countries. You could put the best leader ever in those countries. But first, they had to give up, now it's around 60% of their bank reserves to the French treasury. They were not in control of their natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
The local people could only access whatever was not wanted by French companies. French companies had first right of refusal to all minerals. They had given up their military control. Were you aware, my sister, that in those 14 countries, they could only purchase military equipment if approval was given by France? 9 times out of 10, approval was not given. Now, you are the new president, my sister, of Burkina Faso before Traore. You have given up your control of your finances. You have given up control of your natural resources. You have given up control of your military. And then your chief of staff says to you on day 1, my sister, Mr. President, you stay away from those 3. You're free to run the country any which way you want. What country do you have to run? Now, Nigeria is a different story. Let me say that.
I was just going to say that.
We have to look at corruption in Nigeria. We have to look at the right leadership in Nigeria. So we have to look at every African country individually. Every country has its own peculiar needs and issues that they have addressed. But still, let's prioritize. Let's understand these issues fully. Let's talk about those issues of the root. There are some serious number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues that must be addressed in order for whoever is going to be in charge to truly make a difference. We have our leaders who are running to Europe to beg for $40 million when you got trillions sitting in the ground. But when you try to do something But now taking over your minds, you are mislabeled. The media descends upon you. They are going to create a lot of this chaos. You won't find instability in any African country that's not rich in minerals. You will not find instability in a poor African country. Why? Because they have no interest there. So the conflicts are being used as a diversion to keep these heads of state chasing their tails so they could continue to do their dirty work, which is why I am in full support of President Trump by taking back the USAID. That's another entity that is being used to infiltrate. Theirs is to go in, constantly create chaos. They are spending American taxpayers' money. Most of the money that USAID is getting from the US government is not going to the people. Those people are living lavish lifestyles in Africa at the expense of the American taxpayer. So I agree with President Trump. USAID, get out of Africa and every country that you're in. We know the game they're playing. So we want a leader at the African Union who can come in and call a spade a spade. We don't need those NGOs in Africa. We need an AU chair who's going to kick all of them out. We don't need them. They are there to infiltrate and make it difficult for us to run our countries the way we should.
One of the big challenges, perhaps even the biggest challenge, will be for the new chair the issue of funding. The membership of the African Union only funds the organisation to the tune of a third, and the rest of the money comes from external players, from the EU and other international organisations.
I mean, that's an absolute disgrace, isn't it, really?
It is. How's that
disgrace.
going to be changed?
Well, actually, we need to go through the growing pains. They need to refuse that aid.
Exactly.
Because the countries have enough money. If they take the positions that are being taken by the Sahel nations are saying we keep our money. Our natural resources are our wealth. But the average country, you saw what Botswana did. Botswana was getting 10% of their diamonds. And they had to fight to get 25%. And here now they're fighting to get 50%. What kind of stupidity is that? These are your own diamonds. That the BS comes in and say, we're going to mine them and we'll give you 10%. We're going to mine them, you have to fight to get 25%. Now they're fighting to get 50%. Well, let's do better. Kick the BS out of Botswana. Botswana must benefit 100% from its diamonds.
My dear sister, you're quite right about so many of these things. And indeed, there's a lot of support for the Sahel countries. I have told France to go away. And we're hoping that they'll do a lot better on their own. And if they must reconnect with France in future, that it'll be a healthier relationship. But I don't agree with you on issues like the claim that wherever there's conflict, there's foreign interference. Because I come from a place called Ogoniland, which is a conflict area in Nigeria, sort of. I think, Africans are perfectly capable of turning on each other without having their sort of like strings pulled by America or anybody else. I mean, Africans are human beings, flawed as flawed fundamentally as Americans or anybody else. And they're quite capable of creating totally useless and destructive conflicts without anybody else telling them what to do. We're not complete puppets. In both good and evil, we have agency,
While I agree with you, and it brings me, again, your particular situation in the area where you come from, what you must realize also, my sister, is that when you look at those agencies that are all over in the name of aid, our people, well-meaning people, they get to believe in these individuals who are giving them bags of rice, who are giving them seeds, and they think that these people are more important instead of what could be done if we were to come together and begin to look from within. We are meant to believe as Black people that we ourselves are not capable of taking care of ourselves. There are enough of our people, and you have to agree with me on that one, my sister, that our own people don't believe we Black people are capable of managing ourselves. Our own people believe that only white people can bring the change that we need. So when you go into any community, you'll find some that are Pan-African, but I can assure you, you'll find many others who feel that we are better off with white people than with our own Black people. I've seen it even in my own country of Zimbabwe. To this day, you still hear some people who will say we were better off with Ian Smith. What kind of an African is that? How much do you understand about how we got to be where we are? And yet you have enough people in Zimbabwe who still think we were better off with Ian Smith. We continue to have more and more Africans who are willing to risk it all, like they did in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, because this is what this moment is calling for. This moment is not calling for comfort. Change is not easy, and change is not going to come through comfort. Comfort is not going to bring you the change that you need. We need Africans who are ready to be made uncomfortable, Africans who are ready to come together and suffer for the betterment and ultimately what's best for the continent and hopefully betterment for our children and generations to come.
I do hear this thing about the colonialism having been better than what we have now here in Nigeria and in other African countries I've visited. And I don't think people really want white domination and insults. I think what they mean is that when white people are greedy or awful, they're also productive simultaneously. So a white person, like, I don't know, I can name any number of awful white people who are heads of state, but they always build the roads and the hospitals, and they always have the 24 hours electricity. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Black people tend to be just destructive without much constructiveness attached to it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but let me say this, my sister. Again, if you were to be the president of a country, wouldn't it be nice if you could be allowed to run your country without interference? Wouldn't it be nice for you to run your country without spending 50, 60% of your GDP paying for loans that were created by the ones before you, paying for loans that were intentionally created?
But it's Mnangagwa's problem. That some white man is sabotaging him and messing up his chances of doing a good job? Or is he just a lousy leader? It's not just him. There's so many of them. Why do we keep on blaming white people?
Well, the truth of the matter is, I'm not sure where you're getting your news from. That's another issue where the truth is not being told, where the Western media, with their influence, they don't want to hear the truth. They want to exaggerate or at least push the agenda that serves what they are doing. If you go to Zimbabwe one of these days, I would like for you to join me in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is moving forward. Roads are being built. Dams are being built. Development is taking place. So you are listening to the wrong media, my sister.
But I can tell you, going back to Nigeria, I just think, look, you know what? We had 11 power cuts in an hour this morning. That ain't no white people caused that. It's us.
Ambassador, can we get back to our new man at the top, Mr. Youssouf, who we've kind of forgotten in all of this? He comes from Djibouti. He is, as you've already explained, he's a long-serving foreign minister. He obviously knows the Horn of Africa very well. He must know the lay of the land in Sudan. How would you expect him to grapple with this seemingly intractable problem that we're facing in Sudan?
Again, when you look at the situation in Sudan, Sudan is a very special case. Starting from the many coups that have occurred prior to the situation that we're dealing with. And I struggle with trying to understand where these divisions keep coming from. Who is funding these people to continue to wage these wars among ourselves? Yes, there's an element of greed among the leadership. These were people who were once friends. These were people who once worked together. But we do know how pivotal Sudan is to the West. Its location, its access to the ports, and of course its natural resources. There are things that Sudan has that the West wants. So let's not ignore that. Yes, our brothers need to work together. Our brothers need to put their selfish agendas aside. But I still go back to saying, if we can just be allowed as African leaders to run our countries without interference, that is where the biggest problem is. Yes, our leaders do better.
My dear ambassador, if they were to make you leader of the AU, I mean, you have a strong personality and you have ideas. What are the first three things you would do to liberate the continent?
But to be honest with you, my thing would be to make sure that our people are well informed. Because when people are well informed and understand the real issues, they will behave like they did in Burkina Faso when the president's term was supposed to end. Because the people understood the issues, they're the ones that came to the streets and forced their leadership to change the constitution that allowed a good leader to stay. Our people need to know the truth. I would dialogue with the entire continent. I would make sure, because most people, until I started talking about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization and exposing what France was doing to Africa, majority of people did not know. So it is through knowledge and education and genuine understanding. Let's empower our people. And we need to have our own media. That's something I pushed even when I was at the AU, to have our own Pan-African media that can tell our people the truth. For the most part, our people are getting their news from the Western media with their own agenda. So I will tackle information dissemination of the truth, and nothing but the truth to the people. As you have seen in the Sahel, when people were armed with facts and the truth, people acted.
You've given the Sahelian Three a very good write up, a real seal of approval. Yet you've not said anything about the backsliding of democracy. The democracy has been completely replaced by the military. Does that matter, do you think, for an African country?
Let me say this, my sister. It's a very good question. Do you call what France was doing in those countries democracy?
No.
Thank you. So what are we talking about? So Africans are being told, oh, you are not respecting democracy. Do you call what France was doing for centuries democracy? The answer is no. Let's not be stupid, please. We are being led to believe a certain way. The murderer is in front of you, and he's defining somebody else as the murderer. Let's be serious. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what media says. Oh, we no longer have democracy in Burkina Faso. Did we have democracy before Traore? This is now we are having democracy. When people took to the streets because they want the constitution changed, they wanted their leader to stay in place, where else have you seen that happen? Where people are saying, we want our leader to stay. That is democracy to me. What France was doing in Africa, that is not democracy. And I think it's funny that you should even, I'm glad you asked that question, because people at home listening, they're also saying that. We need to let them know. That is exactly the kind of thinking we don't want. And that is the thinking that you are being fed by the Western media.
It sounds, I think, as though President Trump would agree wholeheartedly with you. He's not particularly interested in exporting democratic values. He's given that up. Any kind of interaction, engagement he has with Africa is likely to be transactional, we know, and based upon trade. That's something I presume you would agree with.
Well, I think we should concentrate on trade. President Trump is saying America first. The Africans should also say Africa first. As long as the United States can come to Africa and trade with Africans fairly, that is all we need. Exploitation now.
Yeah, but he's a racist. Doesn't that bother you?
President Trump can call us whatever he wants. We know who we are. Unless if we also are stupid enough to believe that we are what he says we are. This is about trade. The point is, that is who the American people chose. And we got to trade.
Okay. Now we've touched upon some of the problems, the conflicts that are raging on the continent. We've touched upon the fact that servicing debt relief is a massive issue for most African countries.
Yeah.
What about the issues of climate change, of extreme weather events that the continent is having to battle? It's at the front line of so much of the climate crisis, isn't it? And with America pulling out of the climate agreement, the Paris Agreement, I mean, what kind of impact is that likely to have on Africa?
Let me say this. The issue is about negotiating. We're going to sit back and just wait for someone to tell us how things should be done, then that's exactly how the way it's going to be. We need to take a very important position. Do we have an Africa common position? Do we have a place that we say, we the Africans, when we go to the table to negotiate, do we have a position? The answer is no. When I was in Washington, when the foreign ministers of finance would come to Washington, the other parts of the world, the Indians, the Chinese, everywhere else, they would meet with their ministers in advance of the meetings at the World Bank. Let them know what is available and what can they do, what is the strategy, what to say, with who. I tried to do the same thing with the ministers of finance and say, can't we at least come and meet and I'll bring in the Africans who worked in the World Bank to see if they can also advise us. In Burundi, this is what can be done. In this country, this is what can be done. This is what's available. The most I ever got to come was 5. They never showed up. They were busy shopping. So the question is, do we have a common position as Africans when we go to negotiate with the Western world? The answer is no.
No.
You know, my sister, Nigeria is my beloved country.
Nigeria is a dump.
Good spirit, you are very bold people. But if we could unite all of you and let you join us, because no, if you
Believe you me, I'm deeply unimpressed by Nigeria. So and I don't think anybody's dividing and ruling us. We're dividing and ruling ourselves.
I love Nigerians, and I know it's when Nigerians come together, the most intelligent people, the most hardworking people are in Nigeria.
Not necessarily. There are just more of us because it's because the population is big, so there's more of everything. There are more intelligent people, but there are also more stupid people. There are more evil people. You know what I mean?
All right.
There's more of everything. There are more superstars.
My sister, when Nigeria sneezes, Africa gets a call. When Nigeria succeeds, Africa is going to succeed. So we need the right leadership in Nigeria. We need Nigerians we need to increase the critical mass of Nigerians who are not greedy, Nigerians who think Pan-African, Nigerians who understand the role Nigeria can play in the development of Africa. I am not giving up on Nigeria.
We spent a lot of time, haven't we, talking about the ills and the bleakness of the scenario at the moment. But what about the opportunity that this presents? I mean, the global order, as we know it, is being systematically torn up, isn't it? But the global order didn't really benefit Africa, did it? So perhaps this is a golden opportunity for the leaders of the continent.
Martin, you hit the nail on the head. The global order needed to be disrupted. The World Bank the financial system needs to be disrupted. The health, World Health needs to be disrupted. The World Trade Organization needs to be disrupted. Yes, we may not like what President Trump is doing, but he is disrupting systems that have needed to be disrupted.
And on that note, Ambassador Arikana Chihombori, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's it for this edition of Africa Here and Now. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and share with your friends. We're also on all the major audio platforms as well as on your smart speaker. Follow us on the socials. I'm on X at Martine Dennis. Get in touch. Let me know what you'd like to hear more of. All past episodes are on our website, AfricaHere&NOW.com. There's some interesting blogs there too, so check it out. We recorded this episode on Sunday the 16th of February. Anne Busby is our producer. Our original music is by Enric Adam. Simon Elliott put everything together. Our thanks to our guest, Ambassador Arikana Chihombori. And from Donu and me, thank you for your company.